Hi, in this video I will walk you through the installation and configuration of the Covient software Edge Gateway and the Diplomat MFT server. For the purposes of this demo, I will be using this single virtual machine that I host in Azure. In a real-world environment, you would put your Edge Gateway into a DMZ, where your web servers and external mail servers are, for example, and the Diplomat MFT would be on a secure backend network. The magic of the Edge Gateway is that external parties can connect over SFTP to your Diplomat MFT server in the backend without requiring any inbound holes in the firewall. So in my example here, we can see that I am allowing port 2112 in from from the public-facing internet into my Azure virtual machine. This will be where I host the SFTP services in the DMZ. All right, so here I have my machine up and running. Let me show you a quick diagram of what we're going to be doing today. Although this is on one physical machine for purposes of this demo, this is effectively the solution architecture that we're talking about. Inside the internet-facing DMZ, I will be installing the Edge Gateway alongside other internet-facing services like mail servers, web servers, etc. In this case, I'm exposing port 2112 to the internet, where my customers, clients, suppliers, and partners can use their SFTP client, represented by the laptop on the left, connect over port 2112 to SFTP, and what happens is it is magically brokered to the backend SFTP server back here. Covient Software Diplomat MFT and the SFTP server are in your trusted network. I have my SFTP server on the back end listening to port 22, the standard SFTP port, just to show you that it's not connecting directly to it. And what's going to happen is when these two are configured, the SFTP server will reach an outbound connection to the Edge Gateway over port 26841 by default. It's configurable. And that establishes what we refer to as the peer notification channel, over which messages are passed back and forth. For example, when a client comes in requesting an SFTP connection, it will send a message back over that bidirectional channel, even though it requires no inbound holes in the firewall. It will say, here comes a connected client. At that point, SFTP server reaches out over the data port 7638 to establish another socket, and then the Edge Gateway simply brokers the traffic from the client to the server, never decrypting it, never inspecting it, never changing it, so no secure data ever is visible or stored inside the DMZ. All right, so that's the architecture. Let's see how it works. Step one is you download and install the Diplomat server, Diplomat MFT server, and the Edge Gateway, which I have done here, and they're already installed. You can see when I install them, I've got two new services in my Service Control Manager, Edge Gateway, and in this case, Diplomat Trial. Or if you bought a license, it would be Diplomat MFT 64. It's very important that before you start the service, go ahead and assign it a logon account. In this case, I use the local system that I comically refer to as Booger, but go to your logon tab and pick a local account. That way you can control the access to the data these services get to through that account. For example, the program files folder or the program data folder. All right, so I've got both of these installed. Change user account, now I can start them. So I'll start one and the other, and then we'll see how they are configured. So they're starting up, they're both running. Let's start with the Edge Gateway. If I install the Edge Gateway on a machine inside my DMZ, I've got to configure it so that I choose the ports over which it listens for external connections and these ports right here. It's fundamentally all you have to do. So let's go to the Edge Gateway. By the way, when you install it, you do get shortcuts installed on your desktop, or you can just bookmark it. It's a web-based administration utility. By default, the admin UI for the Edge Gateway is on port 9273. Note that this is plain text, not HTTPS, and that is because we only listen to localhost. You can only access the server through localhost or 127, not internet accessible. It's a very lightweight set and forget kind of configuration. So rather than mucking with SSL certificate and stuff, you just connect to it locally. No traffic ever leaves the box. And here we'll log in. Default password is going to be Diplomat, all lowercase. And when you log in the first time, you can change that password here. All right, so the configuration screen on the left-hand side, much like our diagram, is what are you listening to SFTP connections for? So in this case, I choose the IP address that I want to listen to. If I listen to localhost, external connections won't be able to reach me. So it's usually an IP address or all incoming. In a secure environment, you're going to separate across two network cards, right? So you're going to have a network card on this side with its own IP address that listens to inbound connections, and a network card on this side that listens for connections from the secure backend network to isolate those two and protect them from firewall access. All right, so I'm listening on this IP address. I'm listening to port 2112 for SFTP. And over on the right-hand side, different network card. In this case, to simplify it, I'm just listening to all incoming. And these are my ports like illustrated in the diagram. Right, that's the configuration to make it work. There are a few other things you can do. If you configure this with just one server, this part doesn't really matter. But let's say you have a failover mechanism, or you purchase two edge gateways combined with two Diplomat MFTs on the back end, then you can use round robin. So imagine this diagram with another SFTP server for resiliency and another edge gateway. Both SFTP servers can connect to this edge gateway. And edge gateway has the policy of saying, how do you want me to direct traffic? It's either round robin, which directs traffic from clients to a specific server and then goes to the next one and just rotates between them, except I'm going to use sticky sessions, which means an incoming client based upon their IP address, if they make multiple connections, then they will all go to the same target SFTP server based upon that IP connection. That way, if there's a particular user using FileZilla, WinSCP, or some utility that opens multiple connections, it makes them all go to the same destination, makes things easier. Alternatively, you can have a failover strategy. So for example, all traffic goes to this SFTP server unless such time as it's down. And if I can't reach that server, it's not connected, I will go to whatever backup SFTP server you provide to me. It can be anywhere. It can be in a different data center as long as it has a routable IP address from the back end to this edge gateway. And in so doing, I will continue to direct traffic there and mark this as the new one as the primary. And it's up to you to kind of redirect it back at your convenience. So in this case, you would have a different IP address, right? So I would have another connection coming in, or I know that it's the machine located at 10.0.1.134. So this is my primary, but I'll fail over. In this case, easiest just round robin, leave it default. You can also have IP access controls on this backend network to make sure that these open ports on the firewall are only connectable by certain IP addresses. It's one or the other. It's allow everything except you blacklist something else. So in this case, I allow everything except the following, or I deny everything except the following. So this becomes the whitelist of the only one allowed through. Easiest thing is to secure your firewalls on the back end in the front end so that you control it at a firewall level, but this provides additional software protection. Okay, and the rest shows you here is active status. You can leave this window open. We can see that I've got one Diplomat MFT connected to me. Happens to be the one on localhost. I see it right here. And it currently has no active connections, no file transfer, but it's green. It's good to go. All right, so that's Edge Gateway configuration. Now let's look at Diplomat MFT. Again, I launched the shortcut. I log in. Default password is Diplomat until you change it. And here's our Diplomat MFT server. When you set up an SFTP server, your first step is to create an SSH key pair to strongly identify your SFTP server. So right-click on key pairs, create key pair, fill out the values. In this case, I've already done that. So I can now go to settings, SFTP server. Notice I have it enabled. I tell it to use the key pair I just created. I pick the root folder where all my SFTP server users will be housed by default. I can't go above that level. Everything is there or lower in the directory tree. And if you wish, you can use a UNC path. So if you could put server 01 data SFTP, for example. Just make sure that the user account under which the service is running has access to this UNC path. Let me undo that. So everyone's located here. These are the default permissions for the user. These are the authentication policies, etc. You can even go to advanced settings to pick ciphers, hashes, compression, key exchange algorithms, etc. And we have a feature that allows you to delete files out of user folders that are older than X amount of days. You don't explode your disk space. All right, so the basic setting for SFTP server is here. And then the extended setting for Edge Gateway is right here. It's really simple. I'm going to use the Edge Gateway. Where is the address? Now remember, in a real world scenario, it would be a different machine. It'd be the IP address of this machine in your DMZ. I happen to be running both on the same machine for convenience. So it is located right here on my local machine. Port number, and then what's the identifier for this machine? This is how we can make sure that this Diplomat MFT server announces itself as this unique identifier to the Edge Gateway so it can keep track of things. Once it's on and we click Save, then it makes the connection, and that's why we see this as a green connection here. Oops, it just restarted, so it'll take a second. All right, so what we see is that Diplomat MFT on the back end with its SFTP server is configured to connect to this Edge Gateway. This Edge Gateway is listening on port 2112 for SFTP traffic. So now let's finish this by logging in as an external account through port 2112 as SFTP. And by doing so, we'll see that it gets brokered all the way through to the back end. And it can't be directly to this back end because that's listening on port 22. So it must be flowing through the Edge Gateway. So here we have, it's green again because the server, SFTP server, got its settings changed and restarted, and now it's reconnected. I'm going to drop back down here to my desktop. So I'm no longer in the virtual machine. I'm going to open FileZilla. And I have this configured already under my Azure Edge Gateway test. You can see it's connecting to that IP address, this domain name at port 2112. And here's the folders that we see. So let's double check that it's what it should be. Remember that under my SFTP server, I have this as the root. So let's see what the contents of this is. And under my SFTP users, I have configured this. So I have one user named foo. Home folder is foo. So that's a subfolder of the root. And they can't go any higher than that. So if I look inside the foo folder, this is what belongs to foo. And sure enough, basic rollout, that's here. And if I transfer files from my local machine up to that Azure machine through the Edge Gateway, we can see that some of them are still in progress, but here they go. They're all up on the remote site. And if I look inside my actual physical machine, here they are here. All right, so that's the overview of installation and configuration of the Edge Gateway and the Diplomat MFT SFTP server, so you can protect your data from clients, customers, partners, and suppliers flowing through your internet accessible DMZ and securely onto the back end without requiring any inbound holes in the firewall. Thank you very much.